Good day, I'm Daryl Scott. I'm a pediatric clinical geneticist. I work at Texas Children's Hospital, and I'm an associate professor at Baylor College of Medicine. In my clinic time, I mostly see pediatric patients who have genetic disorders or are thought to have genetic disorders. Most of them come to see me because they're trying to identify the cause of those disorders and then learn more about what that means for their family and for their future.
So our question is, how do my son's genetics affect his autism diagnosis?
A lot of families do wonder, why are they coming to see a geneticist if their son or daughter has already been diagnosed with autism? Often they think that the diagnosis has already been made and they're not sure why additional testing might be necessary. Actually, the diagnosis of autism is something that's quite different from genetic testing. Autism diagnoses are typically done or made by a developmental pediatrician or a psychiatrist who performs certain tests to determine whether a child has autism or does not. Those standardized tests ultimately give the child a diagnosis of autism or indicate that the child does not have that. When families come and visit me, they often try to explain why their child has autism. In other words, what are all the tests that have been done in order to prove that? For me, it does not matter nearly so much how that diagnosis was made. If a child has autism, developmental delay, or intellectual disability, my job is to try to determine what is the cause of that problem. Almost all those same problems, autism, intellectual disability, and developmental delay, are all going to be caused by genes that have a function in the brain. And when those genes are not functioning correctly, the brain is either not formed correctly or does not function correctly. And so my purpose as a clinical geneticist is to try to identify the why, but not to determine whether a child has autism or to determine if a child has developmental delay or a child has intellectual disability. Another way to think about this might be a child who comes to see me because they have a cardiac defect. My test will not prove one way or another whether that child has a cardiac defect. That's done by an echocardiogram. And so we know that the child either has a hole in their heart or a problem with their heart, or they don't. The families then come to me and say, why did my child develop a hole in his heart? Now that's something that I can try to determine genetically. And so when a family comes and visits me and has a child that has autism, I explain to them that I'm trying to identify the cause of that autism. Often families think that autism is not genetic, but in a great percentage of cases, we identify a specific cause that we can say is the cause of that child's autism. We do so doing genetic tests. Those genetic tests may reveal that the child has a specific change in a gene that's important for brain function. We then sometimes will give that child a very specific molecular diagnosis. A molecular diagnosis basically means that we're identifying the gene that is the cause of the medical problems that we see in that child. Sometimes parents say, after we identify that change, does this mean that my child no longer has autism and instead has something else? But again, like the heart defect, my test or the genetic test will not determine whether a child has autism or not. Instead, it just tells us the why. And so when I ask how the genetics of my child affect his autism diagnosis, it actually would not affect it at all. But having a molecular or genetic diagnosis may give us further insights on how to keep that child healthy. And so we might learn that this child who has autism may have other complications that could be in his future, which we could avoid if we take certain steps. Or we may find that he's at higher risk for a certain type of cancer or another type of developmental issue that, again, we can either monitor for or hopefully correct before it becomes a problem. And so determining a molecular diagnosis for a child with autism can be very beneficial. But having a molecular diagnosis will not change whether a child has autism, developmental delay, or intellectual disability. Those diagnoses are done in a different way, just like identifying a cardiac defect is done in a different way.